The ONS Defiant shuddered as it exited FTL, the deck plates vibrating beneath Captain Jack Reynolds' boots. Warning lights flashed across the bridge consoles, bathing the command center in an ominous red glow. "Status report," Reynolds demanded, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. Lieutenant Commander Diana Foster, his XO, looked up from her console with alarm etched across her features. "Sir, the FTL matrix suffered a catastrophic failure during transition. We're not where we're supposed to be." "Define not where we're supposed to be, Commander." Foster swallowed hard. "According to stellar cartography, we're approximately 3.7 light-years off course. We've emerged in Sector 47 Alpha." The bridge fell silent. Every crew member knew what that meant. Arxian-controlled space. Deep in enemy territory. "Stealth systems?" Reynolds asked, already moving toward the tactical station. "Operational at 73% capacity," reported Tactical Officer Marcus Wilson. The FTL malfunction created an energy surge that damaged the quantum displacement array. "Dr. Taylor is already working on repairs, but we're not fully cloaked." Reynolds studied the holographic display showing their position relative to known Arxian patrol routes. The Defiant had emerged dangerously close to an established enemy monitoring station. If they'd been detected during their violent exit from FTL, Arxian warships would already be converging on their position. "Communications, passive scan only. Let's see what our neighbors are talking about," Reynolds ordered. Communications Officer Eric Winters nodded, his fingers dancing across his interface. "Intercepting Arxian transmissions now, sir. Running them through the translation matrix." Reynolds turned to Dr. Morgan Taylor, who had just stepped onto the bridge, her uniform stained with coolant fluid. "Doctor, I need those stealth systems at full capacity." "How long?" Taylor ran a hand through her short blonde hair, leaving a streak of grease. 4 hours minimum, Captain. The quantum matrix took a serious hit. I got my best people on it, but we can't rush this kind of repair without compromising the entire system. "We may not have 4 hours, Reynolds replied, his gaze returning to the tactical display where several Arxian vessels were now visible, their patrol patterns methodical and precise. Foster moved closer, lowering her voice. "Sir, regulations are clear. In the event of accidental incursion into enemy territory, we're to withdraw immediately and report intelligence gathered. We're not equipped for extended operations behind enemy lines." Reynolds nodded absently, his mind already calculating probabilities, contingencies, risks. 12 years of fighting the Arxians had taught him to trust his instincts. Something about their current situation felt wrong, felt like an opportunity. "Captain," Winters called out suddenly, "I'm picking up fragmented communications between Arxian vessels. They're discussing some kind of energy harvesting operation in this sector. Translating now. They're calling it Project Kronos." Reynolds raised an eyebrow. "Kronos, the ancient Earth deity of time." "Sir," Wilson interrupted, his voice tense. "Sensors are detecting unusual energy readings from the fourth planet in this system. I've never seen anything like this. The energy signature is fluctuating across multiple dimensional planes simultaneously." The main view screen shifted to show a distant reddish planet surrounded by what appeared to be a constellation of Arxian vessels. They were arranged in a precise geometric pattern, all focused on what looked like a massive mining operation on the planet's surface. Reynolds studied the image, his decision crystallizing. "Send these readings to intelligence. Priority encryption." "You're not planning to leave, are you, sir?" Foster asked, already knowing the answer. Reynolds shook his head slowly. "The Arxians are harvesting something they believe will give them a decisive advantage in this war. If we retreat now with incomplete intelligence, we risk everything." He straightened his uniform and addressed the entire bridge crew. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're staying. Full passive scanning protocols. Let's find out what's worth this much Arxian attention." As the crew acknowledged his orders, Reynolds watched the distant Arxian fleet with narrowed eyes. Whatever Project Kronos was, he intended to learn its secrets, even if it meant taking the Defiant deeper into the heart of enemy territory. Arxian patrol vessels changing course, Wilson announced, his voice cutting through the tense silence that had fallen over the bridge. 6 warships entering our sector. Pattern suggests they're deploying a neural net detection grid. Captain Reynolds leaned forward in his command chair. Time until they're within standard detection range. 17 minutes, sir, Wilson replied, his fingers sliding across the tactical display. Their neural net can detect our energy signature even with stealth systems at full capacity. Reynolds turned to Dr. Taylor. Doctor, what's our status on the Quantum Ghost Protocol? Taylor's expression tightened. The QGP was experimental technology, developed in the shipyards of Earth, but never tested in actual combat conditions. It's operational, Captain, but I must emphasize the risks. We haven't completed sufficient field testing, Toe. Will it hide us from the Arxian neural net? Reynolds interrupted. Theoretically, yes. It would render us practically invisible by shifting the Defiant partially out of phase with normal spacetime. Taylor hesitated. But, Captain, the biological effects on the crew are untested. We could experience severe sensory distortions, molecular destabilization, possibly worse. Lieutenant Amanda Hayes, the ship's quantum physicist, stepped forward. Sir, I've reviewed Dr. Taylor's concerns. I believe we can mitigate the worst effects by cycling the phase variants. It won't be comfortable, but it should be survivable. Reynolds nodded grimly. Survivable beats the alternative. Prepare to initiate the Ghost Protocol on my mark. As the crew scrambled to their stations, Lieutenant Commander Foster approached Reynolds, speaking softly. Jack, there are other options. We could make a run for the system's asteroid belt, use it for cover while we repair the conventional stealth systems. We'd never make it, Reynolds replied. Those Arxian sensors would lock onto our engine signature the moment we moved. He studied the tactical display. Besides, I want to know what they're doing here. This level of activity suggests something big. Ghost Protocol ready for activation, sir, Taylor reported from engineering. Reynolds took a deep breath. All hands, secure stations for phase transition. Initiate Ghost Protocol. Now. A low hum built throughout the ship, and the lighting flickered as power was diverted to the experimental systems. Then came the sensation, a feeling like the entire vessel was suddenly submerged in thick liquid. Sound became muffled, and colors shifted subtly across the spectrum. Reynolds felt a momentary vertigo as his inner ear struggled to adapt to existing partially between dimensional states. Protocol active, Taylor confirmed, her voice sounding distant despite her proximity. The Defiant is now operating at a quantum phase variance of 0.37. We're effectively invisible to conventional detection methods. Wilson blinked rapidly, adjusting to the disorienting visual effects. Arxian vessels continuing their sweep pattern. No indication they've detected us. Maintain position and minimum power settings, Reynolds ordered. Let them pass by. As the Arxian patrol ships moved through the sector, Hayes focused on the sensor readings from the distant planet. Captain, I'm detecting something extraordinary. The energy signatures are chronometric in nature. Explain, Reynolds demanded. They're harvesting particles that exist simultaneously across multiple timelines, Hayes said, excitement overriding her discomfort from the phase shift. We've theorized about them for decades. Chronotons, particles that experience time non-linearly. Security Chief Kyle Donovan, who had been monitoring Arxian communications, straightened suddenly. Sir, I'm intercepting transmissions between the Arxian fleet and something else. Not human, not Arxian. The transmission patterns are unlike anything in our database. Reynolds frowned. Can you determine the source? Working on it, Donovan replied, then froze. Captain, you need to see this. The main view screen activated, showing an Arxian research vessel at the edge of the mining operation. As they watched, portions of the ship began to visibly age, metal corroding, then crumbling to dust in seconds, while other sections remained untouched. The effect spread rapidly across the vessel's hull like a temporal infection. "What the hell are we seeing?" Foster whispered. "Time accelerating at different rates across localized areas," Hayes answered, her voice hushed with both scientific awe and horror. "This is why chronotons are so dangerous and so valuable. They can manipulate the flow of time itself." The Arxian vessel disintegrated before their eyes, decades of decay compressed into seconds. Reynolds' jaw tightened. Looks like the Arxians aren't the only ones interested in these particles, and their new friends aren't playing nice. "Multiple contacts approaching the destroyed Arxian vessel," Wilson reported, his fingers dancing across the tactical display. "Configuration unknown. Definitely not Arxian design." The view screen magnified to show sleek, asymmetrical ships with organic curves that seemed to pulse with an internal bioluminescence. They moved with unnatural precision, surrounding the debris field where the Arxian research vessel had disintegrated moments before. "They're collecting the chronoton particles," Hayes observed, studying her sensor readings. "The hull composition of those ships appears to be absorbing the particles directly." Reynolds watched intently as a much larger Arxian science cruiser altered course to intercept the unknown vessels. "Looks like the Arxians aren't giving up their mining operation without a fight." "Sir," Foster interjected, "we should maintain our phase variance and observe. This is valuable intelligence, but direct intervention would violate." An alarm cut through her words as the ship's sensors detected a massive energy buildup from the unknown vessels. "Energy spike," Wilson called out. "They're charging weapon systems." The alien ships released pulses of shimmering energy that distorted the space around them. When they struck the approaching Arxian cruiser, sections of its hull simultaneously aged decades in seconds, while other areas reverted to their raw metallic components. The effect was horrifying, like watching time flow in multiple directions at once across the ship's structure. "Temporal weapons," Hayes whispered. "They're manipulating the chronoton field to accelerate or reverse time in targeted areas." Reynolds leaned forward. "Casualties. The Arxian cruiser has approximately 300 crew members based on its class," Wilson replied grimly. "Life support is failing across 60% of the vessel. They're venting atmosphere." Reynolds' jaw tightened as he watched the cruiser list helplessly, its engines flickering and dying as temporal distortions rippled through its power systems. "Captain," Winters called from communications, "I'm receiving a distress signal from the Arxian vessel. It's breaking through on all frequencies." He hesitated. "Sir, they're broadcasting their identification. That's not just a science cruiser. It's carrying High Commander Kexnar of the Arxian Imperial Fleet." The bridge fell silent. Every officer present knew that name. Kexnar was the architect of the Arxian war strategy against humanity, responsible for the devastating attacks on 3 human colony worlds. She was considered the most dangerous Arxian military mind in the conflict. "Can we intercept her transmission?" Reynolds asked quietly. Winters nodded, routing the signal to the bridge speakers. A harsh, distorted voice filled the command center, speaking in broken standard English. "Require immediate assistance. Unknown hostiles. Failed diplomatic. Will share all data on chronoton technology." Dr. Taylor moved to Reynolds' side. "Captain, if we maintain the Ghost Protocol, we can observe without risking." "And watch 300 Arxians die," Reynolds interrupted, "including the one person who might know everything about their military strategy against Earth." Foster stepped forward. "Sir, with all due respect, those are enemy combatants. Our mission parameters don't include rescue operations in hostile territory." Reynolds stood, his decision already made. "Our mission is to gather intelligence critical to Earth's survival. Having the architect of the Arxian war strategy in our debt qualifies." He turned to Wilson. "Tactical, prepare temporal shields based on Lieutenant Hayes' chronoton research. Engineering, we need full power to weapon systems." "Sir," Hayes interjected, "our temporal shields are theoretical. We've never deployed them against weapons like these." "No time like the present, Lieutenant," Reynolds replied grimly. Communications, prepare to transmit to the Arxian vessel. Let them know help is coming. He addressed the entire bridge crew. I know what I'm asking. This is a calculated risk, but sometimes the greatest opportunities come disguised as impossible situations. He returned to his command chair. Disengage Ghost Protocol. Battle stations. The Defiant shimmered back into normal space, its hull solidifying as the phase variance dissipated. Reynolds watched the view screen as the mysterious alien vessels turned toward them, their sensors detecting the sudden appearance of a human warship deep in Arxian space. Let's introduce ourselves, Reynolds said softly. The Defiant's shields flared brilliant blue as the first temporal weapon struck. The entire ship shuddered, but held together. Temporal shields holding at 84%. Hayes reported, surprise evident in her voice. The chronoton diffusion is working. Reynolds didn't waste time on celebration. Target the lead vessel. Focused pulse cannons, maximum yield. The Defiant's weapon systems responded instantly, firing brilliant streams of energy that sliced through the void. The alien ship attempted to evade, its movements unnaturally precise, but Wilson had anticipated the maneuver. The pulse struck the vessel's midsection, causing its bioluminescent hull to flicker and dim. Direct hit, Wilson confirmed. Their hull is absorbing most of the energy, but they're diverting power from weapons. The other vessels are changing formation, Foster warned. They appear confused by our presence. Reynolds nodded. They weren't expecting us. Lieutenant Hayes, what's happening with their temporal readings? Hayes studied her console. Fascinating. They seem unable to lock onto our chronometric signature. Our human neural patterns are creating some kind of interference in their targeting systems. Let's use that advantage. Helm, bring us between the aliens and the Arxian cruiser. Wilson, continue firing to keep their attention on us. Reynolds turned to Winters. Establish communication with the Arxian vessel. Tell them we're creating a corridor for evacuation. As the Defiant maneuvered into position, the alien vessels regrouped, their formation shifting with fluid, almost organic coordination. Captain, Winters called out, I'm receiving a transmission from the lead alien ship. It's unlike anything I've ever seen. The data structure is multidimensional. Can you decode it? Reynolds asked. Hayes moved to Winters' station. It's not language as we understand it. They're communicating through quantum entanglement, sending information across multiple potential timelines simultaneously. Her eyes widened. Captain, I believe they're the Vor. The Vor? Foster echoed. They're just old spacer legends. Apparently not, Reynolds replied grimly. What do we know about them? Before Hayes could answer, a blinding flash of light engulfed the bridge. When it faded, a shimmering corridor had formed between the Defiant and the damaged Arxian cruiser. An emergency docking tube extended from their airlock. First group of Arxian survivors coming aboard. Sir, Security Chief Donovan reported from the docking bay. 23 individuals, mostly science personnel. Medical is triaging them now. Reynolds nodded. Keep me informed, particularly when High Commander Kexnar arrives. The ship rocked again as another temporal weapon grazed their shields. Shields at 67%. Taylor warned from engineering. The chronoton interference is growing more intense. We can't maintain this position much longer. The Vor fleet is splitting, Wilson reported. 3 vessels maintaining position here, but the others are. He paused, rechecking his readings. Sir, they're jumping to FTL. Multiple trajectories. I'm tracking at least 12 separate destinations. Hayes looked up from her analysis. Captain, based on their vector calculations, they're heading toward major population centers, both human and Arxian worlds. Reynolds' blood ran cold. They're launching a coordinated attack on both our civilizations. The bridge doors slid open, and Security Chief Donovan entered, escorting a tall, austere Arxian female. Her silver-blue skin was marred with burns, and her uniform, once immaculate, was torn and stained. But her bearing remained imperious, her 4-fingered hands clasped tightly behind her back. Captain Reynolds, Donovan announced formally, High Commander Kexnar of the Arxian Imperial Fleet. Kexnar's vertical pupils contracted as she surveyed the human bridge. Captain, she said, her voice resonant and precise, it appears we have a mutual enemy. Reynolds stood, facing the architect of so much human suffering. So it seems. The Vor were believed extinct for millennia. Kexnar continued. Our chronoton harvesting operation awakened them. They exist across multiple timelines simultaneously, allowing them to predict every tactical move before it's made. Not every move, Reynolds replied. They seemed confused by our ship. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Kexnar's features. Yes, that requires explanation. But first, you should know, the Vor won't stop with our forces here. They view chronoton technology as their evolutionary advantage. They will eliminate any species capable of harnessing it. Both are homeworlds, Reynolds concluded. Kexnar nodded solemnly. We have precisely 43 hours before the simultaneous attacks begin. After that, neither humans nor Arxians will exist in any timeline. 43 hours, Reynolds repeated, his gaze locked with Kexnar's. Not much time to save two civilizations. The Defiant shuddered as it accelerated away from the battle zone, the three remaining Vor vessels in pursuit. Aboard the ship, 62 Arxian survivors had been secured in designated areas under guard, while High Commander Kexnar stood on the bridge, an uncomfortable presence among her longtime enemies. The Vor utilize chronoton particles to perceive multiple timelines simultaneously, Kexnar explained, gesturing to the tactical display. This grants them perfect predictive capabilities. Our military algorithms are completely transparent to them. Yet they seem confused by our ship, Reynolds noted. Lieutenant Hayes, any theories? Hayes had been analyzing combat data from their brief engagement. Captain, look at this, she said, bringing up comparison diagrams on the main screen. When the Vor engaged the Arxian vessels, their targeting was precise to within 0.002 microns. Against us, their accuracy dropped to 0.47. A significant degradation. Explain, demanded Kexnar. I believe it's related to how our species make decisions, Hayes continued. Arxian neural pathways are structured in logical, algorithmic patterns, similar to your computer systems. Highly advanced, but fundamentally predictable. And humans? Foster asked. We're messier, Hayes replied with a slight smile. Human decision-making incorporates logic, emotion, intuition, even random impulses. Our brains create what I call temporal static, patterns that can't be easily predicted across timelines. Taylor leaned forward from her engineering station. That's why the Ghost protocol worked so well. The quantum phase variance combined with human neural patterns created a chronometric signature the Vor couldn't track. Reynolds considered this information carefully. You're saying our greatest advantage against the Vor is human unpredictability. Precisely, Hayes confirmed. Arxian commanders follow strategic doctrines with mathematical precision. Humans sometimes just go with our gut. Kexnar's expression tightened with what might have been disdain. You suggest we abandon tactical discipline in favor of intuition. Not abandon, Reynolds corrected. Adapt. If the Vor can predict any planned strategy, then our plans need an element of unpredictability. He turned to Wilson. Tactical. What's our status? The Vor pursuit vessels are maintaining distance. 3 Arxian destroyers have responded to High Commander Kexnar's distress call and are on intercept course, Wilson reported. Reynolds nodded. Good. We'll need reinforcements. He turned back to Kexnar. Commander, I need to speak with your ship captains when they arrive. You intend to give orders to Arxian Imperial vessels? Kexnar asked incredulously. I intend to save both our species, Reynolds replied evenly. And to do that, we need to implement a command structure the Vor can't anticipate. Foster understood immediately. Human officers making split-second decisions, directing both human and Arxian ships. Precisely, Reynolds confirmed. We'll utilize your superior technology with our unpredictable command style. Kexnar bristled visibly. The Arxian Imperial fleet has maintained tactical perfection through 12 generations of warfare. You expect us to surrender command to instinct. As if in answer, the ship rocked violently. Wilson's console erupted in alarms. Vor vessels have adjusted their targeting algorithms, he shouted. They're compensating for our evasive patterns. Helm, random course change. Pattern Delta 7. Reynolds ordered instantly. The Defiant banked sharply, narrowly avoiding a temporal blast that would have struck their engine section. They nearly had us, Foster observed quietly. Kexnar watched the tactical display, her expression unreadable as the Vor weapons found only empty space where the Defiant should have been. How did you select that particular evasive pattern? She finally asked. Reynolds shrugged slightly. I didn't use a selection algorithm. I remembered a flight maneuver from an old Earth entertainment program I watched as a child. No logic to it at all. For perhaps the first time in recorded history, a high commander of the Arxian Imperial fleet appeared speechless. The Vor have evolved to counter logical, predictable opponents, Hayes explained gently. But human illogic, our creativity, intuition, even our emotional responses, these create patterns they cannot anticipate. Kexnar's gaze moved from the tactical display to Reynolds. You truly believe human unpredictability can defeat an enemy that exists across all possible timelines? Reynolds met her gaze steadily. I believe it's the only thing that can. After a long moment, Kexnar inclined her head in what appeared to be a gesture of acquiescence. Very well, Captain Reynolds. When my ships arrive, you may explain your approach. All vessels maintain formation, Reynolds commanded from the Defiance Bridge. In the hours since their confrontation with the Vor, 3 Arxian destroyers had joined them, forming an unusual alliance fleet. The view screen displayed their destination, a dense chronoton field surrounding the 4th planet of the system. Swirling eddies of blue-green energy created patterns that shifted and changed even as they watched. This is madness, murmured the Arxian commander Vexilor over the comm channel. These fields are too unstable for safe passage. The Vor will expect us to avoid the chronoton field, Reynolds replied calmly. Which is precisely why we're going through it. Kexnar, now dressed in a fresh Arxian uniform, stood beside Reynolds. My ships will follow your lead, Captain, but I advise caution. Chronoton exposure at these levels can have unpredictable effects. Unpredictable is exactly what we need, Reynolds said with a tight smile. He addressed the combined fleet. All vessels, prepare to execute Reynolds Maneuver Alpha. Human officers have transmitted decision parameters to your navigational systems. Foster approached Reynolds, lowering her voice. Sir, Reynolds Maneuver Alpha? I made it up 30 seconds ago, Reynolds whispered back. That's the point. As the small fleet approached the chronoton field, Hayes monitored the energy readings from her station. Captain, the chronoton density is increasing exponentially. We're beginning to see temporal fluctuations across the ship. All hands, prepare for chronometric distortion, Reynolds announced shipwide. Remember your training. Taylor looked up from engineering with an arched eyebrow. Sir, there is no training for this. I know, Reynolds replied. But it sounds better than brace yourselves for the unknown. The Defiant shuddered as it entered the outer boundary of the field. Immediately, strange effects began manifesting throughout the ship. Colors shifted across the spectrum. Sounds echoed before they were made. Crew members reported seeing ghostly images of themselves performing actions they hadn't yet taken. Multiple timeline perception, Hayes explained, her voice fluctuating between different tonal registers as if speaking from various points in time simultaneously. We're experiencing temporal echoes from alternate versions of ourselves. On the Arxian vessels, the effects were more severe. Panicked communications flooded the channels as Arxian crew members struggled with the contradictory sensory input. Their neural architecture isn't adapted for this kind of chronometric confusion, Hayes noted. Arxian minds seek patterns and logic. This environment defies both. Kexinar's normally composed features showed strain as she experienced the same effects. Our military training doesn't prepare us for paradoxical perception. Reynolds gripped his command chair as reality seemed to fracture around him. He could see multiple versions of his bridge crew, some making decisions he hadn't yet ordered, others responding to threats not yet manifested. Rather than fight the disorientation, he embraced it, allowing his mind to flow between the possibilities. "Wilson, I need a targeting solution," he ordered, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Targeting what, sir?" Wilson asked, confused. "The Vor aren't in sensor range." "They will be," Reynolds replied, pointing to an empty section of the view screen. "Right there, in approximately 40 seconds. Wilson stared at him, bewildered, but began calculating the targeting solution nonetheless. Hayes looked up from her console in amazement. "Captain, how did you know?" "I can see it," Reynolds said simply. "Not clearly, but it's like I'm experiencing multiple moments in time at once. Some version of me has already witnessed their arrival." Exactly 38 seconds later, 3 Vor vessels materialized at the coordinates Reynolds had indicated, emerging from their version of FTL travel. "Fire," Reynolds commanded. The Defiance weapons lanced out, striking the lead Warship before its defensive systems fully activated. The vessel's hull rippled with temporal distortions before sections began to disintegrate. "Direct hit," Wilson confirmed, astonished by their success. Reynolds turned to Kexinar, whose expression reflected both surprise and newfound respect. "You see, Commander, in this environment, human intuition becomes tactical advantage. We don't fight the chaos. We use it." As the remaining Vor vessels regrouped, Hayes called out urgently, "Captain, chronotin levels are spiking. The field is destabilizing." The view screen showed the space around them folding in impossible ways as timelines began to merge and collide. "All vessels, hold position," Reynolds ordered, though he could see fragments of alternate futures where some ships had already begun to flee. "The real battle is just beginning." Chronotin storm forming at coordinates 227 Mark 43. Hayes called out, her voice cutting through the chaos on the bridge. "The timeline disruptions are cascading." The Defiant shuddered violently as waves of temporal energy washed over its hull. On the view screen, reality itself seemed to fracture, showing multiple overlapping versions of the same space. "Damage report," Reynolds demanded, gripping his command chair as the artificial gravity fluctuated. "Hull integrity at 64%. Taylor responded from engineering. "The temporal shields are failing. We're experiencing structural degradation across multiple decks." Around them, the chronotin field had transformed into a swirling maelstrom of colliding timelines. 2 of the Arxian vessels had already retreated to a safer distance, their crews unable to function in the chronometric chaos. Only Commander Vexler's destroyer remained alongside the Defiant, its systems struggling to maintain cohesion. The Warships, however, moved through the storm with unnatural precision, their hulls absorbing the chronotin energy. "They're feeding on it," Hayes realized, watching the sensor readings. "The chronotin storm is making them stronger." Reynolds studied the tactical display, seeing not just the current positions but fragments of future movements. In the swirling chaos of overlapping timelines, a pattern began to emerge, something unexpected. "Lieutenant Hayes," he said suddenly, "the chronotin storm is creating a temporal tunnel, an Einstein-Rosen bridge." Hayes quickly adjusted her sensors. "You're right, Captain. The chronotin particles are forming a stable wormhole leading directly to Earth space, Sector 12 Alpha." "Our way home," Foster whispered. Reynolds nodded grimly. "And our way to warn Earth about the Vor threat." Kexinar stepped forward. "The wormhole is destabilizing rapidly. Your sensors show it will collapse in approximately 12 minutes. Can both our ships make it through?" Reynolds asked Hayes. The lieutenant shook her head. "The tunnel can only accommodate one vessel before collapse, and the chronoton density is increasing. Any ship attempting passage would need significantly stronger temporal shielding than what we currently have. The Arxian vessel has more advanced chronoton dampening technology, Kexnar stated matter-of-factly. Its chances of successful transit are 7% higher than your Defiant. Reynolds met her gaze. Then the choice is clear. We transfer all essential personnel and data to Commander Vexler's ship. The Defiant will remain behind to engage the Vor, buying time for your escape. A noble sacrifice, Captain, Kexnar observed. But I calculate the Defiant would last less than 3 minutes against the Vor without support. Before Reynolds could respond, Medical Officer Lisa Mitchell burst onto the bridge. Captain, I've made a discovery you need to see immediately. Mitchell activated the central display, showing 2 neural scans side by side. This is a human brain pattern during chronoton exposure, she explained, pointing to the left image with its chaotic, unpredictable energy patterns. And this is an Arxian neural signature. The right image showed precise, structured pathways. We've seen this already, Foster noted. Human unpredictability versus Arxian logic. Yes, but look what happens when they're synchronized, Mitchell continued. The display merged the 2 scans, creating a complex overlapping pattern that pulsed with stable, powerful energy. During triage of the Arxian survivors, I had to establish a neural link with 2 patients simultaneously, Mitchell explained. The result was this hybrid pattern that actually stabilized the local chronoton field. Hayes rushed to her own console, verifying Mitchell's findings. She's right, Captain. When human and Arxian neural patterns synchronize, they create a unique chronoton signature, one that could potentially stabilize the wormhole long enough for both ships to pass through. Reynolds turned to Kexnar. Is this possible? Could we establish a large-scale neural link between our crews? For the first time, uncertainty crossed Kexnar's features. Our neural interface technology was designed for Arxian physiology. Adapting it for humans would be unprecedented, but theoretically possible. Reynolds pressed. After a moment, Kexnar nodded. Yes, though it would require direct neural connection between command officers to establish the primary link. Reynolds stood. Then I volunteer for the procedure. As do I, Kexnar replied, surprising everyone on the bridge. If our species are to survive the Vor, perhaps we must evolve beyond our separate limitations. As if responding to their decision, the ship lurched violently. The chronoton storm intensified, battering both vessels with waves of temporal energy. We're out of time, Hayes warned. The wormhole begins collapsing in 57 seconds. Neural synchronization at 87%, Dr. Mitchell reported, monitoring the connection between Reynolds and Kexnar. Both commanders sat in modified medical chairs at the center of the Defiance Bridge, a web of glowing neural interfaces connecting their temples. Reynolds' face was tense with concentration, while Kexnar's normally stoic features showed rare emotion, a mixture of discomfort and wonder. I can feel your thoughts, Captain, Kexnar said softly. They are not what I expected. Likewise, Commander, Reynolds replied, his voice strained. Your logic has its own kind of beauty. Around them, smaller neural connections had been established between key human and Arxian officers, creating a cascading network of shared consciousness. The effect was immediately visible on Hayes' chronoton monitors. It's working, Hayes exclaimed. The quantum signatures are stabilizing. The wormhole's collapse has slowed to 17% of its previous rate. Foster coordinated the evacuation procedures between both vessels. Transfer of essential personnel is 60% complete. We need 5 more minutes to finish loading the chronoton research data. The Vor are adapting to our defensive pattern, Wilson warned from Tactical. 3 vessels approaching on Vector 227 Mark 89. Reynolds closed his eyes, diving deeper into the neural connection. Through Kexnar's perception, he could access the advanced targeting systems of the Arxian destroyer. Through his link, Kexnar gained Reynolds' ability to perceive multiple timelines simultaneously. Together, they formed something new, a hybrid consciousness that could navigate the Chronoton storm with unprecedented precision. Execute defense pattern Reynolds Kexnar 1. They spoke in perfect unison, their voices overlapping eerily. Both vessels moved in flawless coordination, their weapon systems firing in sequences that seemed random yet devastatingly effective. The Warships, accustomed to predicting patterns, found themselves unable to anticipate the hybrid strategy. The neural link is affecting the Chronoton field, Hayes reported with amazement. The wormhole is actually growing more stable. Fascinating, Taylor said from engineering. Their combined neural pattern isn't just resisting the Chronoton disruption. It's actively reshaping it. The view screen showed the swirling energy of the wormhole organizing itself into a more defined tunnel, pulsing with the same rhythm as the neural link between Reynolds and Kexnar. Final personnel transfers complete, Foster announced. Both ships are ready for transit. Reynolds opened his eyes, which now glowed with a faint blue luminescence, the same color reflected in Kexnar's gaze. All vessels, prepare for wormhole transit. Maintain neural synchronization at all costs. As the ships aligned with the wormhole's entry point, the Vor launched a desperate final attack. Temporal weapons fire erupted around them, distorting space-time in dangerous patterns. Chronoton shielding failing on decks 4 through 7. Taylor called out. Divert power from weapons, Reynolds ordered. Focus everything on the shields and engines. Through their neural link, Kexnar transmitted Arxian shield harmonics directly to Taylor's console. Modulate your shields to these frequencies. They will provide 18% greater resistance to temporal weapons. The Defiant shuddered as it absorbed another hit, but its shields held. Both vessels accelerated toward the wormhole, the swirling tunnel of energy growing brighter as they approached. Transit in 5 seconds, Hayes counted down. 4, 3. A massive temporal blast struck the aft section of the Defiant, causing cascading system failures across the ship. But the neural network held, the human-Arxian connection growing even stronger in response to the crisis. 2, 1. Transit. Space-time folded around both ships as they entered the wormhole. The sensation was unlike any FTL jump. Reality itself seemed to stretch and compress simultaneously. Through their neural link, Reynolds and Kexnar guided both vessels through the quantum turbulence, their combined consciousness mapping the safest path. In a blinding flash, the ships emerged into normal space, Sector 12 Alpha, just outside Earth's defensive perimeter. The neural link began to fade as the Chronoton effects dissipated, but something of the connection remained, a permanent bridge between two minds once divided by war. Earth's defense fleet immediately detected their arrival, a swarm of vessels moving to intercept the unexpected Arxian warship. Open a channel to Earth Command, Reynolds ordered, his voice hoarse from the strain. As communications established contact, Reynolds and Kexnar stood side by side on the Defiance bridge, their postures identical, their purpose unified. This is Captain Jack Reynolds of the ONS Defiant and High Commander Kexnar of the Arxian Imperial Fleet, they announced together. We bring warning of the Vor threat, and the solution to defeat them. On view screens across Earth's defense network, the unprecedented sight of human and Arxian commanders standing united sent shockwaves through both civilizations. The war that had raged for decades would soon be forgotten in the face of a greater threat, and the greater potential of what two species could accomplish together.